In my hometown, there's a unique shop of oddities called Hex. And Hex is without a doubt my favorite place to window shop. But I rarely leave with anything. The prices are high, and rightfully so. And though I love their selections, I can't really say that I need anything they have to offer. It would be different if I were financially stable enough to justify such luxury items. But alas. Instead, I relax in the shop's tranquil atmosphere and drum up business for them whenever I get a chance. But one day, there was a new arrival at the Hex. One that I couldn't help but gush over. There, sitting on an easel, behind the store's front window, was a large, handmade, one-of-a-kind Ouija board. The woodwork was beautiful, the text was striking. It was crafted so elegantly that I couldn't help but be captivated by it. I had to know where it came from and how much it was. Curious as ever, I made my way into the shop and inquired about the board's origins. He told me it was a new piece sent over to the shop by a friend of a friend who had inherited it from a relative. It was an heirloom that had been in this person's family for many, many years, passed down from generation to generation. They were too spooked by the board to continue the tradition, and it was commissioned to the Hex. The more the owner talked about it, the more I wanted the board for myself. It was too beautiful a piece to pass up. It was something I wanted. It would be a conversation starter and an item I would proudly show off to my friends and family. The downside? It was $500. After very much private debate and further conversation, we came to an agreement. He would put the Ouija board aside for me, and I would make weekly payments until it was paid off. He even offered me a slight friends and family discount for being a regular at the shop. After all was said and done, I would be paying $432 for the board, which was still a hefty price tag. But I was grateful for the compromise and gladly agreed to the conditions. A grueling 9 weeks later, I was the proud owner of my very own spirit board. It came in an equally well-crafted wooden chest, upon which the word Ouija was sketched. Along with that was a presumably what I guess was the year 1913. And upon opening it, I noticed a few extras that had come with it. Inside the chest was a velvet pouch, and inside that pouch, I found an ivory planchette, an empty picture frame, and a small faded pamphlet entitled User Manual. The pamphlet's contents consisted of diagrams and instructions explaining the use of the board. What I found peculiar was a section towards the back of the manual with a heading that read, Ouija Board Cheat Sheet. It went something like this. Want a simpler way to see your loved ones in the afterlife? Fear not. We have just the solution. Introducing the Ouija Board Cheat Sheet. With this easy-to-follow guide, you'll be able to see those bereaved from you and know that they're okay. Simply follow these instructions. Place the frame included in your kit directly in front of the Ouija in an upright position. Choose one of the following 29 character sequences and place the planchette over the letters and numbers accordingly. The year in which your chosen loved one was born is represented by the 4 question marks at the start of the sequence. The year in which they passed is represented by the 4 question marks at the end. Be sure to visualize the person in your mind as you move the planchette across the board. If done correctly, a still image of your loved one should appear within the frame, however briefly. Disclaimer: This is not a precise science, and results may vary. Each string of characters works differently depending on the person, the time of day, and the area in which you are located relative to the spirit realm. If one sequence doesn't work, try another. This is a one-way window. Your loved one will not be able to communicate with you when their image surfaces. I chuckled. Imagine that, entering a code into a Ouija board and receiving a snapshot from the other side. How ridiculous. But still, something about the Ouija board cheat sheet intrigued me. This board was one of a kind. Such a beautifully crafted piece. I had a burning desire to investigate further, and I followed the instructions to a T. I chose a character sequence and recalled the birth and death and dates of my favorite family pet, Scratches. All dogs go to heaven, right? After placing the planchette over the corresponding characters, I looked up at the frame. Behind the glass, I swear I saw a milky white fog manifest. No image, just cloudy particles dancing about like dust brushed off of an old book. To make sure I wasn't seeing things, I repeated the process. And to my surprise, it happened again and again. With each subsequent use, the smoky substance grew in visibility. It was still faint and hardly noticeable, but I did see scratches. Several theories ran through my mind, many of which sunk into the abyss of my collective thoughts. One, however, kept coming up for air. It was silly, but I kept considering the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this cheat sheet really was legitimate. Crazy. I know. But the prospects of having a truly supernatural artifact was exciting. Even if there was a rational explanation for what I'd seen, I was going to have some fun playing around with this thing. And so I took off. I called up my parents and collected the dates of various relatives that had passed away. I told them I was doing that Ancestry.com thing to learn more about my heritage. And deceptive, yes, but I don't think they would have been so understanding had I told them I was dabbling in the dark arts. After gathering the information I needed, I reclaimed my seat in front of the board. I'd been out with my friends and I'd had a few beers, so my motor skills were not, let's say, exactly in perfect working order. So I totally messed up the first sequence. Using my great-aunt Linda's birth and death years, I entered the code precisely, except for the O. I accidentally placed the planchette over the O in the Ouija code at the top of the board. And what happened next was surprising. I had noticed my mistake and expected the frame to remain dormant. But this was not the case. To my surprise, a clear image came into focus behind the glass. And there was my Aunt Linda. And then her image faded, and another scene came into view. And what I saw was the outline of a structure. And then as quickly as it came, the image faded out of view. What was I seeing exactly? Fascinated by the idea of having a peek into heaven's inner workings, I fudged up even more sequences. I plugged in random years, past, present, future, and made up my own codes. There was no rhyme or reason to my methods. I was basically punching in random combinations just to see what would happen. I was rewarded with little results. Only a couple of my codes worked, and the images that came about were too blurry to make out any discernible features. Despite mostly failing in my endeavors, I kept at it, sequence after sequence. I continued to move the planchette over the board. My curiosity had me running on pure adrenaline, and towards the wee hours of the morning, I struck gold. One of my made-up sequences worked, giving me a proper glimpse into the hereafter. And as clear as day, I saw people, souls of the departed, They all seemed so happy and full of love for each other. It was similar to Earth scenery, but significantly different. Surrounded by love, the landscape felt so peaceful. It's something I look forward to being a part of. Well, in the distant future, of course. I was satisfied with my find, but I couldn't stop there. Using various sequences, I pressed on, and to my delight, I was greeted with more and more images of the afterlife, all of which bore great clarity, allowing me to see even the finest details. Here are some of the things I saw. Skyscrapers, far taller than any I've ever seen, and bridges that went up to the sky. Trees, wildlife, water around every corner. The sky was filled with colors I'd never seen before. With every sequence, I'd find something new and unusual on the other side. I was an explorer of sorts, discovering vast sections of land in uncharted territory. This was not my hobby of choice. Unfortunately for me, it was one that wouldn't last. In an attempt to take things a bit further, I grabbed a camera, pencil, and paper. I would record my findings, write down points of interest. I wanted to make a map of heaven. Sure, it would be a tough project, but one that I would most certainly enjoy. Now, by this point, it was around 8 o'clock in the morning, and I had been at it all night. I was more than ready to take a break, kept some shut-eye. I decided to start my project after I got some sleep, but I wanted to try one more sequence first. I made up another variation of the jackpot code and entered it into the Ouija board, and then watched with bated breath as the familiar white particles came together like puzzle pieces to form another heavenly landscape. The anticipation was torture. I might have been a little obsessed, but at least the way I got my kicks was harmless. Or so I thought. Just as I was about to receive the image, something strange happened. The pieces in the picture frame swirled around at high speed before revealing a blank, dark background. White letters then faded into view, creating a very clear message. Stop. Perplexed, I tried another sequence, then another, and another. Each time, I was greeted with the same word. Stop. I even tried older codes that I knew worked, but to no avail. For a whole hour, I tried and tried, begging the board to work again, to restore its supernatural properties. Eventually, I got one code to work, but not in the way that I had hoped. Upon using the code, old images resurfaced, recycling backwards like slides on a projector. In every one of them, something was amiss. It was distance at first, and as the frame cycled through the images, it came closer and closer to the foreground. It appeared to be some sort of shadowy figure, pitch black and faceless, like a black cloak suspended in the shape of a person. Within a few moments, things took a turn for the worse. The darkness stayed, but the scenery changed. From the afterlife to this life, I saw still frames of my family and friends here on earth, the shadowy figure always looming behind them. I helplessly watched as it creeped up on them, inching closer and closer to contact. I was horrified. Before the figure could reach out and touch one of my loved ones, the slideshow ceased. For a moment, the frame was empty. It was empty of the horrors that once danced behind its glass. I was granted a breather, but not for long. After a moment or two, One last image filled the frame. It was me, sitting in front of the Ouija board, just as I was then. I might as well have been staring at a reflection. Standing directly behind me was the shadowy figure. It reached down and touched the back of my neck. I felt its cold fingers slide across my skin. Breaking free of my initial shock, I jumped and ran for the door. I ran out of the house, tired and terrified. I went to a hotel and I didn't return until the following day. Now that's everything that happened. I can only guess that I upset some angelic being upstairs poking around. I saw things I should never have been able to see. I overstayed my welcome. I broke some kind of divine law. I've since disposed of the board, but that experience stays with me.